away. I have a love who's far away, farther away than the stars. Mother, you've stolen my heart away, heart away, heart away. Mother, you've stolen my heart away, farther away than the stars. Keep me not bound here, teach me to fly, far from earth's madness, free ere I die. Keep me not bound, Ma, teach me to fly, farther away than the stars. There's nothing here nearly so dear, nearly so dear, nearly so dear. Mother, I know your love's ever near, though farther away than the stars. Today's reading from Rays of the One Light is entitled, In Surrender Lies Victory. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. A case might be made for surrender as a path to victory in worldly conflicts, the way of passive resistance, for example, in preference to armed resistance. But our point here concerns a higher kind of surrender, the surrender of our deluded, egoic will to the wise and almighty will of God. Human will is, as Paramahansa Yogananda used to say, guided by whims and limited understanding. The divine will is in harmony with every level of reality. Though the divine will sometimes appears to us at first to be wrong, it proves always, eventually, to be for our highest good. Human will is inconsistent. It leads us one day to success, another to disaster. The divine will, when we surrender to it completely, though it is not always easy to do so, always brings us deep inner peace and joy in the end. Jesus Christ demonstrated this perfect surrender to God's will in the Garden of Gethsemane, the night before he was captured and imprisoned, preparatory to his crucifixion. He went apart from the others to pray and asked them to pray also, but when he returned to them, he found them asleep. Out of his love for them, he excused them, saying, "The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." He then urged them again, saying, "Watch and pray." Their weakness in those circumstances was particularly sad, and the disciples themselves must have regretted it bitterly later on. We all know the symptoms of human weakness, though we may excuse them in ourselves, saying, "Well, after all, I'm only human." But what are the signs of true strength? We find in all cases that these are the fruit of life wholly surrendered to God. The Bhagavad Gita lists these signs in the 13th chapter: humbleness, truthfulness, and harmlessness, patience and honor, reverence for the wise, purity, constancy, control of self, contempt for self-delights and self-sacrifice, perception of the certainty of ill, in birth, old age, and frail mortality, disease, the ego's suffering and sin, detachment, lightly holding thoughts of home, children and wife, those ties which bind most men, an ever-tranquil heart, heedless of good or adverse fortune, with the will upraised to worship me alone unceasingly. loving deep solitude, and shunning noise of foolish crowds, calm focus on the self perceived within and in infinity. These qualities reveal true wisdom, Prince. All that is otherwise is ignorance. Thus, through the Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning again. It's nice to see you all. This teaching, "In Surrender Lies Victory," was nearly impossible for me to understand when I was starting out on the path, because to me, surrender was almost synonymous with defeat. I mean, you surrender only when you have no other choice. You surrender when basically there's the proverbial gun to your head, and okay, now I surrender. But until then, you keep fighting. But I don't want to give the misimpression that I was some sort of, strong-willed, forceful kind of, I'll have it my way. I was not. I was at times very confident and at times very shy. And I remember when I was living at Ananda Palo Alto, where my dear friend Ramani lives also. She's visiting us this weekend. I wanted to get a picture of Master done up in a big frame. And so David Praver, the spiritual director there, gave me a little color slide of the photo and said, take this to the photo place. Now make sure that you get it right, because sometimes since you can't necessarily tell which way it goes, make sure that they get it right. You can tell because, Master's thing that clips his robe is always on his left side and so on. So I said, yeah, of course. So when I went there, we even marked the slide. This is the correct side. This is the slide. This is how the photo should appear, and so on. So I went to the photo place, and the guy said, which side is it? And I said, it's this side, and I'd like 2 sizes and everything and so on, and one nice big giant one, because I really like the photo. And he said, come back in 2 days, and I came back, and you can already guess, the photo was reversed. And so I said, thank you. And I paid him and I brought it home. Because it wasn't easy for me back then to say, actually, because it was either say, okay, or I can't believe you did that, I said. And there was just these 2 extremes of how you could confront someone back then. I was still growing in how you could be calm, how you could behold the world with eyes of calmness and of faith. It was hard for me to say to someone, actually, this isn't what I said, and so on. So I figured, well, you could view that as surrender in a way. I mean, there was something, it didn't go right, and I just thought, that's fine. Not a very dynamic, inspiring example of surrender. What happened, though, Divine Mother wasn't going to let me off the hook. When I returned the slide to David Praver, he said, did they get it right? And the problem was that although I wasn't ready to confront, I also wasn't ready to not tell the truth. And so I said, actually, no, they didn't. And he said, well, did you tell them that they got it wrong? And I said, no. And he said, well, you should go back and tell them, hey, guys, you got it wrong. And I already paid you, but I realized it's wrong, so fix it. I said, that's actually difficult for me. And he said, well, this will be good for you. And so now I had to march myself back to the place and kind of say to the same guy, see this and see this, they got it wrong. He said, I can't believe they got it wrong. I told them 3 times, I'm so sorry, I'll fix it, and so on. And I realized that I had survived that confrontation, and actually the thing got fixed, and this isn't so bad. But in that case, I had to surrender to the fact that I had to confront this guy. I had to surrender, partly because I knew every time I saw David, he would say, and I was glad for that, because sometimes we need a prod and a constant prod. Sometimes we need a witness to say, are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? It's not always that helpful, but in this case, it was extremely helpful. And I was thinking about that because I had to surrender into, again, a confrontation. And so surrender, sort of on a psychological level, we can think of it as surrender means stop resisting growth. Because there is something tugging at us, trying to get us to grow. We have to know which direction is growth, and it won't be the same for each of us, and it won't be the same for every situation. Some person might have just, had the photo reversed and just said, pardon me, here's my baseball bat, conk on the head, I told you to get it right. And maybe that's a direction we want to move more towards being more docile. But in my case, I needed to go in that direction. And so Divine Mother will often tug on us and often push us in a situation, and surrender, again, we can stop resisting her. And that's more, like I said, on a psychological level. On a more spiritual level, surrendering to God's will means a surrender upward, not a surrender downward, a surrender into the flow of grace, not a surrender of getting out of the river and lying on the bank. And in fact, I was kind of thinking, well, but does this even hold up logically? Because if the river is flowing towards God, sure, we want to jump into it and just float all the way home or swim all the way home. But what if the river leads in the other direction? I mean, there's a river to heaven and there's a river to the other place. And how do we know which river we're getting in, which way the current's flowing, and what happens if we were to surrender and go completely down? But, Divine Mother has this little trick where she has sort of like a gate past which we cannot sink. No soul is ever lost, Yogananda said. No matter how far we go in this direction, we will ultimately come back to God. And even again, logically, we may say, well, why is that? Or isn't that fanciful? And isn't everything duality? And so if we can go all the way this way, shouldn't we be able to go all the way that way? No, that's the wrong application of duality. The duality is that we came from God. And so we're making a big, long, fun journey all the way to LAX and Pasadena and Milwaukee, and then we finally return back to her. That's the duality. An emergence from the divine and then a return to the divine. And that's why we can't go so far out that she says, whoops, okay, lost track of Dharmaraj. Oh, well, you can't save them all. And just bye. That doesn't happen for any of us. No matter how far we go, we end up back. And so surrender, again, doesn't necessarily at all being meek and mild and passive and all these things. If surrender is a divine quality, and it's something we see in spiritually evolved people in the saints, well, if you know any saints, or if you read about their lives, or if you meet people who have a great spiritual power to them, they're not necessarily meek and mild and hesitant and self-effacing and so on, except in that they get themselves out of the way so God can come through. But they certainly, can be very forceful. And Swami Kriyananda recently said, when you have a deep experience of bliss, it makes you very decisive. In other words, you say, let's go this way. And people say, yeah, well, I don't know. I was actually thinking. And you just say, no, because you know it will work. In our own lives, we have to do that, but a little more hesitantly. We do have to test our inspirations and say, is this actually real? Was it a real inspiration, or is there too much of my desire mixed into it? Even if I'm right that this is the right direction, is everybody ready to hear that? Is everybody ready to come with me? Should I just say, I had the inspiration and follow me? Well, just try it. I tried it early on in the path. People, they make this face, kind of like this something's burning kind of face when you do things like that, or at least they did at me. Because, no, I mean, is there only one God's will, and is there only one instrument that can receive it? Of course not. Although Haridas said when he was founding the Ananda Sacramento community with Vijay, they were both in charge, and that's when Haridas discovered that there could be two God's wills. And so we need to be aware when we feel an inspiration to say, is even the time right? Can I see what's coming? But is its time come? This can be difficult if we have a tendency to see things whose time hasn't come yet, and we have to kind of sit patiently and again behold with eyes of calmness and of faith. And that can also be a fun way to deal with apparent setbacks, where we have an inspiration, we know something's going to happen, we feel everything, and then it doesn't happen. And there can be the technique of saying, Divine Mother, how come? Just like Yogananda went to, in Encinitas, on the way to Encinitas, there was a little shop that sold shortbread, and he would always stop there and get it and take it back to Mount Washington. And he went there one time, and he asked someone to go in, and the disciple came out saying, I'm sorry, they're all out of shortbread. And this was odd for him, because he'd felt the intuition to stop there. Not because he said, well, go tell them this is Yogananda asking. Thank you, Martin. It wasn't coming from, well, Divine Mother, I'm your devotee, and doesn't that mean I get my shortbread? It was that he felt the intuition to go there, but then it didn't work out. And so he said, Divine Mother, how come? And at that moment, he said, there was a ray of light that descended onto the shop. And the owner came running out with a bag saying, wait, you know what? Just take this one. It's for a local customer. I was saving it for them. I'll make one more batch for them. And so it was a sweet expression of Divine Mother's love. And that's a very beautiful story that we all have now. And if the person just came in and said, here it was, 29 cents, there you go, and he drove off, we wouldn't have that story. And so, how also can surrender be dynamic? Sometimes we have to know there is an injustice going on here, and it is actually my responsibility to resist it, to oppose it. Sometimes we have to know this is an untruth, and I will not endorse it. And I can. Other times, we have to realize this is the way Divine Mother's running the show, and I better just get with the program. And so I had a very prosaic example of that when I was actually first here in Los Angeles. I parked my car over on past La Cienega. Some of you may have heard the story or just have had a similar experience of parking a car in Los Angeles. It's very good to sort of tune into the inevitability of God's will and the absolute non-negotiability of it. So I parked over there by Earth Cafe, and it was hard to park, actually. And so I found this sign that said, no parking here, absolutely, in handwriting, never, 10 to 6 p.m. So I went, oh, well, 6:15, and look, there's no cars on the street. I must be the first one here. And all these poor jokers didn't know how available this street was. I hadn't learned yet, so I parked there and was very confident, and then went in and then came out to make a phone call and saw the guy in the little white car with the little yellow lights with his little book out. And I said, oh, officer, I'm so sorry. I'll move the car. He said, I've already started the citation, sir. So then I said, but the sign says no parking 10 to 6 p.m. absolutely ever. He said, did you read the other sign? The sign right there? Oh, is there a sign there? Oh, that says permit parking only after 6 p.m.? I said, but I'm parked before that sign. He said, did you see the sign over there? And I had a quick decision to make. Was I going to say, look, this is ridiculous. Read that sign. That sign says, and I mean, it's contradictory. How do I know which sign? Or do I realize that he's already begun the citation, that if I especially get angry at it, it's not going to be particularly well for me. Plus, he was a rather well-built fellow. And also, I realized this is happening. This is happening. It's actually sometimes a helpful mantra. I guess this is what's happening now. Instead of resisting it, instead of fighting it, instead of weeping, which, I sometimes do, instead just go, this is what's okay, here we go. This is what's on the menu now. I had ordered something vegetarian, but oh well, here we go. Let's just go with this, because what's trying to happen? So I decided to surrender, but it was surrender upward. It wasn't a defeat. I just thought, okay, I'm just going to skip over the emotion and the frustration and just say, fine. And so I said, okay, but I had a hard time finding a place to park this car. And so now you're telling me I can't park here, so where can I move the car to? And he said, well, I've already written you the ticket, so just leave it here. And so, oh. Okay, and so I just went back in and had the rest of the dinner. It was a very expensive way to park for dinner, but still. And I decided, well, I'm helping the flowers and trees of the roads, by paying the city of Los Angeles and so on. And again, similarly, it is not always or ever necessarily spiritual, quote unquote, to just retire. If someone approaches you with opposition, to say, okay, you know what, you can just have it. For example, an obvious example is the lawsuit between SRF and Ananda, when SRF said, we're suing you for the copyrights of Yogananda's image and writings and books and so on. And if we had said, we're so sorry, we wouldn't have these pictures on the altar. One of the things in the lawsuit, you may not publicly use his likeness, his name. And so you may only quote from his writings when you receive written permission from us. And Swami made the comment, and you can imagine how eager they would be to give it, their permission. And so there were many people in the community who said it's not spiritual to fight. And so we should just accept this as God's will. And other people quoted the Gita and said, yeah, that's what Arjuna said in the Bhagavad Gita, saying, I will not fight my relatives. It's not unlike that in this particular struggle. And Krishna says, you must stand up for truth. And if you just say, because Arjuna says, it would better to be killed in this conflict than to kill my relatives. And it's a tricky question. And Krishna just said, that would be false. It's your duty to be a warrior. It's your duty to stand up for truth. And besides, he said, no one ever dies. We all just step off the stage for a moment and then we come back on. And yet that's tricky too, because then you say, okay, can I kill everyone then? No, obviously not. And so, in this particular case, there were people also who resisted, saying we shouldn't be doing this and so on, or nervousness is another way, are we doing the right thing? But at a certain point, each one who could surrendered into that flow. I guess this is what's happening now. Some people had that clarity from the beginning. Others, it took time. We each have a right to arrive at truth in our own way and in our own time. Another example of that, and we did win the lawsuit also, but another example of that is that there was a second lawsuit, which was a character assassination attempt on Swami Kriyananda. And I can go through that whole story at some point, but there's now a book written about it called A Fight for Religious Freedom. And it's actually published and out now, where our copies are going to arrive soon, but you can probably even find someone who has a copy. Very dynamic story. And we lost that lawsuit. And there's a whole truckload of reasons why we lost that, including not being able to cross-examine the witnesses, which seems kind of strange, and was. But still, Swami Kriyananda, as they were tearing into him on the witness stand, and so I say this because it's very nice to make a case for surrender when everything works out well at the end. But what about when it appears not to? And they were basically threatening Ananda with a multi-million-dollar verdict in an effort to bankrupt Ananda, which the judge even said, you're just trying to bankrupt Ananda and put them out of business. And in this particular case, Swami Kriyananda sat on the stand as they insulted him and so on and said, they can take everything away from me, but they can't take away my love for God. And again, that was a surrender, but a surrender upward. And it was a situation of, if you're going to take everything, go ahead and take it. But what I have in my heart, no one can touch, and it's the only thing I value. Outwardly, if we lose things, as I was saying to some of us who were here at the purification, Yogananda read this poem, The Hound of Heaven, and in it God talks to the devotee. The devotee is fleeing Divine Mother like a fox, and Divine Mother is the hound of heaven, chasing after the fox to catch it. And finally, when she catches up to the devotee, she says, all that I didst but take from thee, all that I took from thee, rather, I didst but take, not for thy harms, but just so thou mightest seek it in my arms. All that thy child's mistake fancies as lost, I have stored for thee at home. Rise, clasp my hand, and come. So even the things we lose, you can say they're not really ours, or Divine Mother said, I lent you this for a while, now I need it back because I have to give it to someone else. But, just find spiritual freedom, merge with me, become a Jivan Mukta, and then you can have it all back. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you. Yes, you can even have the iPhone 6 once you're free in God. You won't want it necessarily. We won't be attached to it, but it's again, the kingdom of God is within us. All these things are there. And when, similarly, she takes everything away, sometimes you can think, I sometimes think of it as, they say the God is a jealous God, and we all say, no, that's ridiculous. And yet, we can think of Divine Mother as jealous. If we ignore her long enough, she starts to get a little jealous and say, you know what, I miss you. I want you to pay attention to me. Yogananda was sitting next to one of his nephews, Hare Krishna Ghosh. Many of you know him. And they were eating, this was in 1935 or 36, and Hare Krishna had saved a particular morsel, just, I don't know what it was, let's pretend it was like a paneer pakora or something, his favorite little thing, and he kept it to the side of his plate where he could eat it at the end. And then he was talking to the person next to him. I mean, Yogananda was sitting right here. But again, it's different when it's every day. So he was talking nonstop to this person, and he turned to his plate, and he noticed that thing was gone. And he knew Master, and so he didn't say anything. And so then he turned and continued talking to this person, and then he turned and the thing was back. And so he turned to Master, and Master said to him, you're talking to everyone, but you won't talk to me. And Hare Krishna really thought about that. And Divine Mother, I think, says that to us. I'm right here. I would like to talk to you too. Could I have some time? And she does. As Master said, the only thing God doesn't have is our love. And she's given us the free will to accept her or reject her. She says, I will wait. But she sometimes says, I need your attention. As Haridas said once to us, Divine Mother will sometimes grab the finances because she knows it will get our attention. And in another situation like this, there's a story of Saint Teresa of Avila, who was always, in communion with Jesus and with God, and after a certain point in her life. And so she lived in a nunnery, but she would go down and receive visitors in the lobby, and at a certain point she would say, excuse me, I have an appointment with someone upstairs. And she would return to her little cell and commune with Christ. And so that was her appointment that she had to keep. But there was a time when a young man entered the lobby and started seeing her. And he was, for one reason or another, very attractive to her. And she found herself kind of lingering in in these meetings with him. And I can't remember the whole story. I wish I'd looked it up. But something to the effect of when she returned to her cell, Jesus was standing there. And he said, "Teresa, I have not come to introduce you to the love of man, but the love of God." And she said, "I'm sorry, sir." And Yogananda's comment on that story, he said, "You see how sweet it is when you can make God jealous?" That's how much he wants us. That's how much our freedom matters to him. Today, September 30th, is Lahiri Mahashai's birthday. And that's why we have him featured here. And I wanted to close with, instead of reading from Whispers from Eternity, reading from the autobiography of a yogi of the moment when Babaji gave to Lahiri Mahashaya the technique of Kriya Yoga. Lahiri was in Raniket in India, which is in the foothills of the Himalayas. And he went out, many of you know the story, but he went out there on a hike, he heard his name, he met Babaji in a cave. If you go to India, you can go to that cave. You can go to Raniket and you can meditate in that cave where they met and where this scene took place. I sat that afternoon on my blanket, this is Lahiri speaking, hallowed by associations of past life realizations. My divine guru approached and passed his hand over my head. I entered the Nirvikalpa Samadhi state, remaining unbrokenly in its bliss for 7 days. Crossing the successive strata of self-knowledge, I penetrated the deathless realms of reality. All delusive limitations dropped away. My soul was fully established on the eternal altar of the cosmic spirit. On the 8th day, I fell at my guru's feet and implored him to keep me always near him in this sacred wilderness. "My son," Babaji said, embracing me, "your role in this incarnation must be played on an outward stage. Prenatally blessed by many lives of lonely meditation, you must now mingle in the world of men. A deep purpose underlay the fact that you did not meet me this time until you were already a married man with modest business responsibilities. You must put aside your thoughts of joining our secret band in the Himalayas. Your life lies in the crowded marts, serving as an example of the ideal yogi householder." Babaji continued, "The cries of many bewildered worldly men and women have not fallen unheard on the ears of the great ones. You have been chosen to bring spiritual solace through Kriya Yoga to numerous earnest seekers. The millions who are encumbered by family ties and heavy worldly duties will take new heart from you, a householder like themselves. You must guide them to see that the highest yogic attainments are not barred to the family man. Even in the world, the yogi who faithfully discharges his responsibilities without personal motive or attachment treads the sure path of enlightenment. No necessity compels you to leave the world, for inwardly you have already sundered every karmic tie. Not of this world, you must yet be in it. Many years still remain during which you must conscientiously fulfill your family, business, civic, and spiritual duties. A sweet new breath of divine hope will penetrate the arid hearts of worldly men. From your balanced life, they will understand that liberation is dependent on inner rather than outer renunciations." Lahiri replied, "How remote seemed my family, the office, the world, as I listened to my guru in the high Himalayan solitudes. Yet adamantine truth rang in his words. I submissively agreed to leave this blessed haven of peace. Babaji instructed me in the ancient rigid rules which govern the transmission of the yogic art from guru to disciple. Bestow the Kriya key only on qualified chelas, Babaji said. He who vows to sacrifice all in the quest of the divine is fit to unravel the final mysteries of life through the science of meditation. Angelic Guru, as you have already favored mankind by resurrecting the lost Kriya art, will you not increase that benefit by relaxing the strict requirements for discipleship? I gazed beseechingly at Babaji. I pray that you permit me to communicate Kriya to all seekers, even though at first they cannot vow themselves to complete inner renunciation. The tortured men and women of the world, pursued by the threefold suffering, need special encouragement. They may never attempt the road to freedom if Kriya initiation be withheld from them. Be it so. The divine wish has been expressed through you. With these simple words, the merciful Guru banished the rigorous safeguards that for ages had hidden Kriya from the world. Give Kriya freely to all who humbly ask for help. After a silence, Babaji added, repeat to each of your disciples this majestic promise from the Bhagavad Gita. Even a little bit of the practice of this religion will save you from dire fears and colossal sufferings. God bless you.